Welcome to Offroad X Files, where the trail meets the unknown. I'm your host, Jimmy Tungate. The engine's off, the dust is settled, you've parked your rig miles past the last sign of civilization, and the only light left is a pale, struggling crescent to the moon. You glance toward the tree line and you see it, a movement. It's not a bear, not a deer, and it's not a trick of the fog. It's a figure, human in outline, but towering and unnatural. A silhouette so profoundly and possibly jet black that it seems to absorb the very essence of the night around it. It's darker than dark, and a shadow with intent. This is the universal fear that we share, from the deepest corners of the Alaska tundra to the sun-baked ridges of California. The fear of the dark observer. Tonight we're scouring every available report for these entities. We'll track the silent, ancient dark watchers of the Santa Lucia Mountains, uncover the terrifying legends of the Seatco, the night people of the Helens, and try to understand the nature of the elusive, darker-than-dark figures haunting North America's deepest wilderness. It's time to face the darkness you can't outrun. This is a special edition I call Where the Trail Meets the Shadow. Our journey begins not with a modern hiker, but with the very first outsiders to gaze upon the rugged beauty of Central California's Santa Lucia Range. In the early 1700s, the Spanish explorers arrived as seasoned, hardened travelers, but even they were unnerved by what they found. Picture, if you will, it's late afternoon, golden hour. The sun is sinking behind the granite peaks, casting long, fractured shadows across the vast chaparral-covered hillsides. An explorer, perhaps pausing to rest his horse, glances up at a distant ridge and sees it. A figure, not an animal, not a tree, but a silhouette that is too tall, too still, and impossibly black. It's a towering humanoid shape often described as wearing a wide-brimmed hat or billowing cloak. But the most disturbing detail, it had no features. It was simply the absence of light. A patch of pure darkness standing motionless and perfectly silhouetted against the bright fading sky. The Spanish called them Los Vigilantes Oscuros, the Dark Watchers. They weren't seen up close, they didn't move, they just stood there, observing the mere mortals from a distant, terrifying dominion. Legend states that if you tried to approach them, they would simply vanish before you got too close, melting back into the shadows where they were born from. For centuries, this became the first rule of the Santa Lucias: never approach Los Vigilantes Oscuros. This phenomenon was so deeply rooted in the culture that it became part of local life. Fast forward to the early 20th century, and you meet people like Olive Steinbeck, the mother of the famous writer John Steinbeck. Olive, a local school teacher, was a true believer in the Dark Watchers. Every day, she rode horseback through the remote forest of the Big Sur, and she always felt like she was being observed. She knew that merely to pass by the realm of these towering, shadowy men was a transgression, and it made her anxious. And so, Olive began to offer a tribute. On her way to school, she would leave small gifts, mostly fruits and nuts, in a specific spot in Mule Deer Canyon. It was a sign of respect to the ancient beings who controlled the landscape. And what she found on her return journey is perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this story. Where she had left her offering, Olive would often find bundles of wildflowers left for her in return. This isn't a story of pure malevolence or terror. This is a story of perceived communication, a quiet, nonverbal exchange between a human and the impossibly dark giant figures of the mountain. It suggests the Dark Watchers are not predators, but guardians, whose intentions are complex. The legendary nature of the Dark Watchers was cemented in American literature by John Steinbeck himself. In his short story, Flight, the protagonist, a young man named Pepe, is forced to flee into the mountains after committing a crime. And before he leaves, his mother gives him the ultimate warning, a quote that echoes the deep-seated fear and respect the locals held for these shadowy figures. When thou comest to the high mountains, if thou seest any dark-watching men, do not go near them or try to speak to them. Later, as Pepe flees on horseback, desperately seeking refuge in the high barren territory of the Santa Lucias, he experiences the chilling gaze firsthand. Steinbeck captured the encounter perfectly. Pepe looked suspiciously back every minute or so, and his eyes sought the tops of the ridges ahead. Once, on a white barren spur, he saw a black figure but for a moment. But he looked quickly away, for it was one of the Dark Watchers. No one knew who the Dark Watchers were, nor where they lived, but it was better to ignore them and never show interest in them. They did not bother one who stayed on the trail and minded his own business. That is the core of the Dark Watcher encounter, a towering and possibly black humanoid glimpsed fleetingly, standing silent on a distant peak, forever watching the travails of humanity. They are the epitome of the darker than dark, a featureless silhouette whose sheer size and unnatural stillness turns a mountain hike into an encounter with the ancient, unexplained sentinels of the wilderness. Centuries later, hikers and travelers are still reporting these encounters in the Santa Lucia Mountains. They're not just echoes of old ghost stories, these are fresh contemporary accounts from people with phones, GPS, and internet access. The details are always the same. It's typically late afternoon, the sun is low, and you glance toward a distant hazy ridge. There stands the figure, impossibly tall, cloaked in black, motionless and fearless. The kind of shadow that seems to absorb light rather than merely block it. Then as you stop, focus, and reach for your camera, it simply vanishes. But what keeps the legend alive and gives it that X Files edge? Its consistency. Why does the vision so often manifest as a tall figure wearing a hat and a cloak? Why is there often that profound, sudden feeling of being intentionally watched? The sightings endure because whether the Dark Watchers are an ancient spirit, a physiological trick, or a bleed through from another dimension, they are a powerful, unnerving reminder that even in an age of total exploration, there are still parts of our world, especially deep in the mountain wilderness, that are held and guarded by something darker than dark. The fact that one specific type of darker than dark entity, the Watcher, has been seen in California for centuries raises a fascinating question. Is this phenomenon purely localized, or is the idea of a malevolent, shadowy humanoid simply a fundamental fear embedded in the human experience? When you scour the legends of North America, you find that nearly every culture, every tribe that lived close to the land had its own version of a dark, elusive, powerful shadow. It turns out the Watchers are not alone. From the dense, ancient forest of the Pacific Northwest, specifically among the Chehalis tribe and their Coast Salish neighbors, comes a legend that perfectly embodies the lurking terror of a darker-than-dark entity, the Seatco, often known simply as the Night People. For the Chehalis, the Seatco is far more than just a large wild forest man, though it shares traits with the Sasquatch-like figures common in the region. The Seatco is regarded as the very demon of the dark forest itself. Imagine the deep primordial woods of Washington State, where sunlight struggles to pierce the canopy, and shadows stretch long and heavy. Even during the day, this is the domain of the Seatco. The legends paint a chilling picture. The Seatco is a malicious spirit, a being of pure wickedness that can adopt a human-like form, but one that is larger, incredibly stealthy, and undeniably terrifying. These creatures are fiercely tied to the night. The Seatco is the reason for inexplicable misfortunes, for the chilling feeling of being watched when no one's there, for the sudden disappearance of game, or the eerie silence that falls over the woods just before something truly terrible happens. They don't just stalk, they are the darkness, the embodiment of the forest's most ancient and dangerous secrets. These are the Night People, a name that perfectly describes a being synonymous with the absence of light, a terrifying entity that melts into the oppressive blackness of the primeval woods, forever hunting, forever watching, and forever reminding the Chehalis of the immense, malevolent power that can hide just beyond the reach of the campfire's glow. When we talk about impossibly tall, looming, dark figures in the northern forest, we must speak of the Wendigo. While often associated with insatiable hunger and cannibalism, the Wendigo's origins perfectly capture the terror of a towering, unnatural figure in the wilderness. In the folklore of the Algonquin-speaking tribes like the Cree and Ojibwe, the Wendigo was often depicted as a gaunt skeletal giant, sometimes 15 feet tall, whose body had been twisted by an evil spirit or corrupted by the taboo act of cannibalism. Crucially, as the Wendigo eats, it grows in proportion to its meal, meaning it can never fill its hunger. This often serves as a cautionary tale. Now imagine a lone Cree hunter struggling through a brutally cold winter, tempted by starvation to eat another person to survive. But the moment he crosses that line, his body begins to change, his heart freezing into a block of ice. He grows unnaturally tall, his eyes sink into dark sockets, and his skin tightens, becoming ash gray or jet black in the moonlight. He can no longer return home. He's doomed to roam the frozen woods, an insatiable, towering shadow always hunting the next human meal. The Wendigo is a cautionary legend, yes, but its appearance, a giant, gaunt, dark, almost human figure stalking in the wilderness, is the spiritual ancestor to many of the terrifying massive dark cryptids reported today. The deep misty forests of the Pacific Northwest have the Seatco, and the arid mountains of the Southwest have skinwalkers. But on the windswept, wide-open spaces of the Great Plains, particularly the Black Hills of South Dakota, the fear of the dark observer takes on a different but equally ominous form, the legend of Walking Sam. Among the Lakota and Sioux tribes, Walking Sam is a tall, slender figure who haunts the Black Hills and is most often seen at night. The reports are unnervingly specific and immediately familiar. He wears a dark, long coat and a broad-brimmed hat. He is always silent, relentless, and truly an entity of the dark. Walking Sam isn't usually described as a conventional animal cryptid. He is a spirit or a manifestation of dread itself. His purpose is simple and terrifying. He preys on those who are vulnerable, lost, or struggling with despair. They say that if Walking Sam approaches you in the dark, you feel a paralyzing cold. He doesn't need to speak, he simply projects pure, unadulterated hopelessness and despair directly into your mind, trying to convince you that the only solution is to surrender to the void. In many ways, this terrifying figure is the true indigenous ancestor of the modern phenomenon known globally as the Hat Man. He is a looming, hatted shadow who appears at the foot of your bed or the edge of the wilderness, demanding your sanity or your soul. Whether he's a spirit of the Black Hills, a creation of grief, or just another one of these elusive, darker-than-dark entities peering from the edge of reality, Walking Sam reminds us that even when the forest gives way to the open prairie, there is no escape from the shadow that follows the lost soul. We've trekked across the landscape of fear from the mist-shrouded peaks of Big Sur, where the Dark Watchers stand guard, to the windswept plains where Walking Sam follows the troubled soul. We've examined the ancient warnings of Tariksuk and the ominous darkness of the Seatco. What these ancient warnings teach us is that the phenomenon of the darker-than-dark observer is not new. Across centuries and countless tribes, this consistent figure, the looming, featureless shadow, is reported not as a mythological creation, but as a direct account of what was seen. The fabric of these legends is woven from the collective experience of people who were out in the deepest parts of the wilderness when the shadows came alive. If ancient people were so certain of these entities, if they built their customs and their warnings around them, then it suggests these stories aren't just fantasy. They are a record of unexplained events that have been happening in the American wilds for millennia. When you travel far enough off-road, you leave the easily explained world behind and cross into the domain of the genuinely unknown. And that's where our guests come in. They're not repeating ancient warnings, they're adding new chapters to this file. They were out there, in places just like the ones we've discussed, in the darkness that was supposedly empty and suddenly looked back. The idea for the theme of this episode came from a recent discussion with one of my friends who had a truly bizarre and unsettling experience while they were hiking in the shadow of Mount St. Helens. The account they shared with me was so profoundly bizarre and was exactly in line with things I've been hearing for years. It became the catalyst for this entire episode. It got me thinking, if these ancient legends are built on factual encounters, then what are people seeing right now in our own Pacific Northwest mountains? And that kicked off my research project into the Dark Watchers and Shadow Beings. That friend who shared his story is joining us today. He wants to remain completely anonymous, so we'll be calling him Henry Smith for the duration of the show. Henry, welcome to Offroad X Files.
Hi, Jimmy. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited to have you on. Now, recently, we were kind of hanging out at a conference, and you told me about something that had just happened to you, like, I believe it was the week before. It was still so fresh. While you were out hiking near Mount St. Helens, can you tell us about that? Like, set the scene, what you were doing while you were out there, what you saw, and then just provide as much detail as possible.
Sure. It was actually Labor Day weekend. It was Sunday, and it was a very nice day, and it was on the Hummocks Trail in Mount St. Helens. Not sure if your listeners are familiar with that, but it's a pretty popular trail there. Lots of folks out on the trail, and I spent a lot of time hiking the Mount St. Helens area, and I just really enjoy it down there. It's beautiful. I had worked myself into what I like to call a hiker bubble, where I was able to get people far enough in front of me to where I wasn't right up on them and seeing them and people behind me. And so I was out enjoying the day. It was beautiful, about 80 degrees or so. And it was around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I had come around a bend in the trail and had gone off to see what was supposed to be a site. Mm-hmm. And I went over, looked at it. It was really nothing exciting. And so I decided to continue on the trail. Well, as I started on back onto the trail, I was looking up ahead of me, and there was a hummock. And I don't know if you know what a hummock is, but it's basically a hill or a knoll. And they were created by the eruption. Mm-hmm. And on this hummock, I saw, coming from right to left, I saw a trail jogger and perfect black silhouette of somebody running. Mm-hmm. And I went, oh, and I remember the first thing that I thought about was the fact is, how could somebody run that fast on these trails? Because it's pretty rocky, pretty narrow. And I thought, man, this is really incredible. So I kept going down the trail, and I was thinking that since he was coming from my right to left, there was probably a bend in the trail, and he was probably going to switch back, and I was probably going to meet him because that's probably where the trail went. So I was expecting we were going to go down and to my left and then up a hill. Well, I got down to where I expected the trail would be, and being very cautious because I didn't want to run into this guy with him running that fast. Right. And I got there, and there was nothing. To my left, it was the hill and a creek that dropped down into a drainage, and a large log and a bunch of trees. And I thought, that's weird. What did I just see? So, I was hot. I was tired. I'm not the most fit guy in the world. So I was thinking, let's go back and get some water at the car. And so I continued to kind of hike on. And the more I thought about it, I kept thinking, what is going on here? What did I see? And it was such a perfect silhouette of what I considered to be a man. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to judge what the height was because of the fact that I saw it for some reason in my mind from basically the mid-hip up, and a regular kind of an arm swing as a regular person would be, but just absolutely cruising. And so I got back to my car and I, thought a little bit more about it and I drove home. So it bugged me for a day because I just kept thinking, what the heck did I see? How did that happen? Where did that guy go?
Yeah.
What was the deal? And so the next day I called up my brother and I just had this weird feeling. I said, dude, I said, I was hiking yesterday and I said, I saw something really weird. And he's like, what? And I said, I saw a ghost.
Huh.
And he said, what? And I said, I saw a ghost. I said, I can't explain it any other way. I said, there was a figure that was open. I mean, it was opaque because it blacked out the trees as it passed it.
Hmm.
I said, I saw this thing, whatever it was, running, just blasting across this hummock, and there's no trail, there's nothing there. There's no place that a person could be running on this thing. And so we started chatting about it. And of course, he's getting on the internet as we're talking, and he's Googling to find out if there's been any missing people or any
Right.
ghost experiences there. And so, with that, it was just so odd because, I spent a lot of time in the woods, as I said, and I've seen bear and I've seen deer and elk. And so
Hmm.
animals, nothing really super surprising there. And I see all kinds of people. And I just have never seen anything like that. And just to have that feeling of knowing what I saw, knowing I saw this with no description, it was completely black. Um, and I could see the outline very well,
Hmm.
but no other real distinct type of features to it. And so super weird. So I decided about 3 weeks or about 3 weeks after that, I decided to go back because I wanted to see
Hmm.
what was going on there. I wanted to do a little investigation. So I went back to the site and I actually took a look and I got up onto the hill. And the hill is about a 45-degree side hill. It's full of brush and there's a huge log there. And whatever I saw, and if it was a human, boy, more power to them to be able to blast down that side hill at that kind of a degree, at that kind of speed. When I did the kind of a speed to motion time calculation on it,
Uh-huh.
it seems like it was probably moving about 12 or 13 miles an hour, and that's cruising.
So, God, I've got a ton of questions, Henry. The first one is just so I understand with the kind of the picture that you've painted. Was it moving across the hill, like horizontally? Was it going up or was it going down?
Yeah, it was actually moving across the hill
Across. Okay, so
horizontally. So,
horizontally.
so
That's
yeah,
very
so that's why
difficult.
it is very difficult, and that's why I thought that there was a trail there.
Yeah,
That's why I had assumed that he was cruising right along a trail that had been cut into the side of the hill.
because you have one foot that's higher than the other as you're walking or running across that surface. Like you said, it's rocky, brushy, a number of things would make it very, very difficult. So you talked about it being really dark and blacked out, whatever it was moving in front of it. Can you describe how dark it was? Was it like, well, I'll let you describe it. I won't put words in your
Yeah,
mouth.
yeah, it was. I don't know how familiar your folks are with one of the ways I would describe it. If you've ever seen thermal black, if you've looked through a thermal imager
Hmm.
before, and the heat turns black, it was that black. But um, it was unbelievably black. It was black. I mean, it wasn't shades of gray
Yeah.
or shades of light, and it was a solid black.
I hear that time and time again, specifically from um, Bigfoot investigators and Bigfoot researchers who are used to using thermal cameras and looking at hot black with a white background where everything, anything that has a really good heat signature is going to be really, really dark black. And I hear it described over and over again that I saw something and it was hot black, or
Yeah,
blacker than black, or jet black, and it's come up all through history, known recorded history of beings or things that were that kind of hot black or jet black. So was that the I know that you frequent the area, but was that the first time you had been on that particular trail?
That was the first time I'd been on that
Okay.
trail. Spent a lot of time around the other ones, but and so yeah, that was what was very odd is that I was in hiker mode, and again, I'm thinking about getting back to the car. I've been on the trail for a while. I'm thinking about getting
Yeah.
to the car. I'm gonna have a good drink and yada yada, not thinking about any strange thing whatsoever. And all of a sudden I see that, and
Yeah.
to have the shock, the realization in my mind at first that that there's a person running across there, and I can't believe they're going that fast. And then to travel down the trail another, I don't know, 15, 20 yards maybe, and realize that there's absolutely no trail there.
Yeah. So you said you saw the whatever it was from the hip up, and it appeared to be, maybe 6 feet tall. You said that its arms were swinging in a motion similar to what, like, maybe a human runner would do. Do you have any sense of how long the arms might have been? Were they like the normal length for a human?
In my mind, I don't see anything that was out of or that was disproportionate.
Okay.
So, it's not like I saw extra long limbs or anything.
Right.
And again, I think that, sometimes your mind sees something, so it's starting to try to it's
Mm-hmm.
trying to fit it into a box.
Yes.
And so whatever I was seeing, my mind is trying to fit it into a box of a trail runner, because I'm sure that's what the first thing came to my mind is what it was. And interesting when we talk about the height and from the hip, I had assumed that the reason why I saw it only from the hip up was because it was obscured by brush.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I went back to do my investigation, I realized there is no brush that would have
Ooh.
obscured that. So,
Now
so I'm
that's
not, I'm
creepy.
not sure. Yeah, so I'm not sure what happened there. Why? Because there was
Interesting.
nothing there that would have stopped me from seeing the legs and the feet.
Huh.
Um, but I only recognize from the mid thigh or
Yeah.
mid hip up.
So you had mentioned you had kind of worked yourself into a hiker's bubble where there's nobody close to you in front or behind, and you kind of have more of that solitudinal experience while you're hiking. I know I like really enjoyed that a lot when I used to hike. Um, did everything go quiet at that time? Like, could you hear birds, insects, things of that nature?
You,
Did you hear footfalls? Anything that you recall?
no, I don't really recall any real change. I think I was paying attention to what I was seeing.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that I did not hear any footfalls. I didn't hear somebody running, which from that distance, if somebody actually would have been running on a trail up there, I would have heard that. So no, I did not hear any of that. I didn't notice any strange odors or anything like that either.
Mm-hmm.
And after it was, after it had moved from my right to my left and had gone out of my view, there was no, no sound, no, crashing of bushes and such, and which, if it would have been a physical entity in my mind, it would have had to have jumped over that big log I told you about and had to
Yeah.
have crashed down into the creek draw. And it certainly would have made some noise. I was making a lot of noise when I got up on the hillside myself.
Huh. Thinking back to when you were watching it run and it was moving pretty quickly, humans, whenever they run, have kind of an up and down bobbing type of gait. Do you
Mhm.
recall seeing something like that, or was it more like flat and even,
Yeah,
like
that
it was
it's
gliding?
interesting because yeah, it's interesting because I do have recollection of that, and that did strike me as very odd that there was no up and down
Ah,
bob.
okay.
This was a solid glide. It was almost, you could almost take, if you would take a black piece of construction paper and would have cut it out and just put it against the screen and just drug it across.
Yeah.
It was that stable.
Wow. It's a pretty incredible sighting. Um,
It's something. I'm
yeah.
still trying to figure out, did I actually see something? Was it a figment of my imagination?
Yeah.
I didn't partake of any substances that day, so there shouldn't have been any problem there. But
Um, so I know we talked before we started recording, and I totally get that you're still processing. I'm still, frankly, processing from my sighting last year, almost a year ago. Um, and it was, clearly to me, it was a Sasquatch that I saw. This, how does it feel to like not really have a sense of what it was that you saw? That it's just kind of unexplained. Does that bother you
It's
more
actually
than
kind
if you had seen it, than
yeah.
if you had known?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is because it's kind of disconcerting because, you do have that thing also, did I just have a mind glitch of some sort? So, what happened there? And then it is a bit disconcerting. I have to tell you that, this has been almost 2 months, and there has not been a single day that hasn't gone by that I haven't thought about it and gone over it in
Hmm.
my mind in great detail multiple times a day. And so it's still that much working and processing through my brain.
Yeah. When you went back out to take a look around, did you happen to take any pictures or video?
Yeah, I did actually.
Okay.
I took some pictures, got some measurements. I actually went up and stood up in the area where I saw it come across, and it was steep enough that I landed on my backside,
Oh.
trying to stand up there, and
Oh no.
so yeah, so it was a little bit challenging on there, but
Okay.
it was very interesting to see. It was a different area than what I'd actually had remembered it because I wasn't paying as much attention because of what had happened, but
Right.
it really does follow a very nice little creek, and where the hummock starts, there's a nice creek pathway that rolls right down there, and then kind of goes right to the edge of the hummus
Uh-huh.
and or the hummock, and then goes down. And so there's a nice little pathway for something there, but um, yeah, I don't know. It was just so strange, and my mind tried to make it natural, but I know it's not natural because of what I saw it do and how
Hmm.
fast I saw it go and where I know it didn't go.
Well, if you don't mind sharing a couple of the pictures, I'll be glad to put them on the
Yeah,
website in the show notes and also on YouTube. Uh, I just got a notification, I guess it was yesterday, that some extra features have unlocked for me, including community. So I can post pictures and polls and things like that there. Um, and I think the listeners would find it very interesting to see the area so they can get a better sense of, what you were looking at. So,
sure. I have one picture that I
okay.
actually have taken and sort of drawn the figure in
Oh, cool.
scale
Okay.
to where it is. So I'll send that along with another shot that kind of just shows the area.
Okay, awesome. So you've been thinking about it daily for a couple months now, Henry. Um, what do you think it was?
You know, I lean more. I've always ghosts are interesting to me, and I've had some experiences with them when I was a child and such. But I'm starting to lean a little bit more to maybe did I see a Sasquatch? I
Hmm.
mean,
Hmm.
just the behavior, the speed, the blackness, the um, it's bizarre, but I still come back, I still get that feeling in my gut about a ghost because there
Hmm.
was no sound and it moved so glided so effortlessly
Yeah.
through there. And the fact that I only saw from the hip up. If it would have been I wonder if it would have been a Sasquatch of some sort. Would I should have seen the lower legs.
Yeah, the whole thing. I
Yeah,
think
so I'm
that's
still really conflicted.
I think that's probably one of the most fascinating aspects of this for me is that the whole thing should have been visible, but only from the hip up was. That's really puzzling. Do you have any plans to return to the area again?
Oh, sure, sure. I love that area. I, hike frequently down there, and so yeah, absolutely. I don't have any fear or any
Yeah.
reservations or anything. It wasn't scary to me at all.
Okay, good.
Um, It was just a lot more just puzzling to it. And, and the only scary part of it was, am I losing my marbles or, did I see something?
Yeah. Well, be sure and keep us posted, Henry, if you have any more experiences or you see anything unusual out there. We'll definitely have you back on to talk about it.
Yeah, I love it. I really appreciate you having me on the show. It's great to be able to kind of talk about it. It helps to process it when you talk about it, and it's good to have be amongst friends to to be able to share this.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you. Always enjoy your company. Appreciate you coming on today, Henry, and telling us about your encounter. Did Henry see a shadow person, a human, or possibly a Bigfoot? All I know is when he recalled what happened in person, he had a sense of wonder on his face, and today he still doesn't understand what he saw, although he tries to make sense of it daily. What do you think it was? Please let us know in the comments, and if you're listening on YouTube, I've set up a poll in the community section of the channel where you can vote for what you think it was. We just heard Henry's encounter with what he described as a black hot figure. We've also talked about the history of the area and the stories of the original inhabitants and explorers. But in the remote areas of the Pacific Northwest, hikers and campers still routinely report encounters with shadow beings and dark figures. Our next story takes place off an old logging road in Oregon and was shared by a witness who was out scouting for a campsite. The night was cool and unusually silent, the kind of stillness the woods achieves only when everything living is holding its breath. Fred was leaning against his truck just past the firelight, checking his gear, when he heard it. A human-like whistle coming from the dense timberline, but it sounded slightly off, like it was trying to imitate a human. Fred knew the Native American legends, the warnings of the Stick Indians, who lure people out into the woods by mimicking human or animal sounds. His natural instinct was to shine a light there, but the feeling of absolute dread paralyzed him with fear and he was unable to do so. Finally, when he dared to look, he didn't see a giant or a pale creature. He saw a patch of absolute darkness. It was human-sized, upright silhouette standing motionless between two trees, and though he saw no eyes, he knew it was watching him. He glanced around to see if there were more of them, and when he looked back, the space between the trees was just forest. He started shaking and he could taste the fear in his mouth. Although Fred was a big guy, he was afraid to stay there now and quickly packed his gear and drove back to town. The accounts always returned to that same key feature, the shadow's unnatural blackness and its silent, intelligent observation. It's the constant reminder that out here, the watcher's not always made of flesh and blood. We've established that there are consistent sightings across the country of an impossibly dark, featureless, silhouette-like being that may be a shadow person or possibly Bigfoot. But we're still left with the biggest question: how? What makes them appear to be darker than dark? Here are some theories. Let's look at the science of darkness. The most compelling modern parallel is the engineered material known as Vanta Black. It's not a paint, it's a field of microscopic carbon nanotubes that stand vertically like a dense molecular forest. When light hits it, the photons get trapped and bounce around until they're almost entirely absorbed. The result, Vanta Black eliminates reflected light, making any three-dimensional object coated in it look completely flat, like a hole torn through reality. This really closely matches the descriptions of our shadow entities. Could these beings possess a biological structure, a kind of advanced keratin or skin that evolved to mimic Vanta Black? An organism that actively traps and absorbs light energy would appear as a seamless, featureless void, capable of moving through the dark without reflecting a single photon. Interestingly, this has also been reported in some UAP sightings where something blacks out the night sky as it moves across it. But maybe the answer isn't in material science, maybe it's in metaphysics. If these entities exist partially in a different vibrational reality, they might be only partially bleeding through into our dimension. What we perceived as a shadow might actually be an incomplete or corrupted visual manifestation of a being that simply is out of phase with our visible light spectrum. The darkness is just our eyes failing to process a three-dimensional object that's not entirely here. The ancient lore of the Navajos Chindi suggests the darkness is linked to a spiritual residue or concentrated malevolence. Perhaps the shadow is a conscious spirit feeding off the intense fear and negative energy of the witness, and the physical manifestation is merely a fleeting, unstable consequence of that energy drain. Finally, we have to consider the cryptozoological explanation. Is it possible that the creatures we're describing are simply an extremely rare, specialized variant of a known cryptid? Most Bigfoot reports describe a dark brown or reddish hair, but a jet black, highly melanistic variant would be virtually invisible in a dense forest. When standing on a misty ridge at dusk, a creature standing 9 or 10 feet tall that absorbs nearly all ambient light would easily appear to be a massive dark silhouette, a watcher. This theory suggests that the witnesses are seeing a hyper-camouflaged animal, but one so perfectly adapted to the darkness that its appearance breaks our visual logic. All three theories, some exotic physics to light absorption, the metaphysical nature of spirits, and the possibility of a unique, ultra-dark cryptid, all point back to the same chilling conclusion. Out in the wild, the void is watching us. Thank you for joining me on this special Halloween edition of Offroad X Files, where the trail meets the shadow. I'm your host, Jimmy Tungate, and I want to remind you to like, comment, and share this episode with your friends and groups. This will help others find the show and Offroad X Files to grow. Until next time, keep your wheels on the trail, and remember, out there in the darkness between the trees are the questions and the answers.